They didn't make a mistake. They made a choice, and the sooner you see that, the sooner you stop betraying yourself. Too often we tell ourselves, maybe they didn't mean it. Maybe it was just a bad day. Just a moment of weakness. But deep down, you know that's not the truth. They knew exactly what they were doing. It wasn't clumsy. It wasn't careless. It was deliberate. They aimed, and they hit. And now here you are, standing at a crossroads, not between forgiveness and revenge. That's not the real battle. The real choice is between self-worth and self-abandonment. Will you value yourself enough to set a boundary? Or will you hand them the keys to your peace again, pretending it was just an accident? You see, forgiveness is powerful. The Stoics taught us that forgiveness frees the soul. It cleanses us from bitterness and resentment. But forgiveness does not mean re-entry. It doesn't mean you hand them another chance to wound you. In fact, when someone damages you intentionally, giving them a second chance isn't compassion. It's self-betrayal. Think about it. If someone broke into your house and stole from you, would you leave the door wide open the next night? Of course not. You'd protect your home. So why do we protect our homes more than we protect our hearts? Society loves to tell you, everyone deserves a second chance. It sounds noble. It sounds kind. But here's the uncomfortable truth. Not everyone deserves a second chance with you. Because not all damage comes from ignorance. Not all harm is born from immaturity. Some people knew exactly where you were soft, where you were loyal, where you were patient, and they used it against you. That's not immaturity. That's strategy. That's manipulation. And if you let them back in, you're not being merciful. You're becoming their accomplice in your own suffering. So here's the question I want you to ask yourself. At what point does forgiveness become self-neglect? At what point does kindness turn into weakness? The Stoics would remind us that boundaries are not walls of hatred, but lines of clarity. Marcus Aurelius said, if someone does wrong, the harm is to themselves. But you, don't join them in that harm. Protecting your peace isn't cruelty. It's wisdom. And here's the heart of the message. Letting go of resentment is noble. But letting them back in after intentional harm is reckless. You don't owe them another chance. You owe yourself your dignity. So when you stand at that crossroads, between keeping your self-worth intact or abandoning yourself for another round of betrayal, choose yourself. Every single time. Because the truth is, they didn't slip. They didn't stumble. They didn't accidentally crush your spirit. They chose to. And now it's your turn to choose. Choose peace. Choose clarity. Choose self-respect over second chances. Recognizing intentional harm and strategy. Let's be honest. Some people don't just hurt you by accident. They study you first. They notice your soft spots, your loyalty, your patience. They watch how far you'll bend before you finally break. And then, instead of cherishing those qualities, they weaponize them. That isn't clumsiness. That isn't immaturity. That's strategy. That's intentional harm. Think about the last time someone lied to you, not once, not twice, but over and over again. Do you really believe that was an accident? A slip of the tongue? No. People don't accidentally gaslight you into doubting your own memory. They don't accidentally betray your trust at the perfect moment to gain the upper hand. Those are rehearsed moves. Those are choices. And this is where many of us get stuck. Because society whispers, be kind, give them another chance. Nobody's perfect. And yes, forgiveness matters. Yes, people make mistakes. But let's draw a line here. Mistakes don't repeat in patterns. A mistake is a sharp word said in anger. A mistake is forgetting a promise once. But when the same behavior comes back again and again, it's not a mistake anymore, it's a method. This is what the Stoics warned us about, confusing accidents with character. Marcus Aurelius once wrote, "You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength." He meant that when you see a person's pattern clearly, don't pretend it's random. Recognize it for what it is, a reflection of their values. Now, here's the tricky part. Many of these people know exactly what to say after they've been caught. They'll put on the mask of regret. But regret and remorse are not the same thing. Let's separate the two. Regret says, I'm sorry I got caught. Remorse says, I'm sorry I hurt you. Do you see the difference? Regret is about them, their loss of access, their loss of comfort. Remorse is about you, the pain they caused. the wound they left. Regret wants a reset button. Remorse wants transformation. Let me give you an example. Imagine a friend who borrows money and never pays you back. When you finally confront them, they say, I know, I should have paid you sooner. I feel bad, let me make it right. That's remorse. They acknowledge the harm, and they move to repair it. Now imagine another friend who, when caught, says, You're really going to hold this over me? Everyone makes mistakes. You're too sensitive. That's not remorse. That's regret wrapped in manipulation. They're not sorry for what they did. They're sorry for being exposed. And yet, how many times have we confused the two? How many times have we told ourselves, at least they said sorry, so maybe they've changed? But words are cheap when there's no action behind them. The Stoics had a phrase for this: don't be surprised. Epictetus taught that when someone shows you their nature, your job isn't to rewrite it, it's to accept it. If a scorpion stings you, do you say, oh, maybe next time it will act like a dove? No, you recognize its nature. And here's the painful truth. Sometimes the people who hurt you most weren't confused at all. They were calculated. They knew how far they could push, how much you would tolerate, and they used that to their advantage. But here's where you reclaim your power. By naming it. Stop calling it a mistake if it was a decision. Stop calling it clumsiness if it was strategy. Stop calling it love if it came with conditions and manipulations. Because when you label their actions correctly, you break the spell. You stop living in denial and you start living in truth. So ask yourself right now, who in your life has shown you regret but not remorse? Who has said sorry but never changed? And how much longer will you keep calling that love, when in reality it's control? The choice is yours. You can continue to excuse them, hoping that regret will someday turn into remorse. Or you can accept what the Stoics taught, that true wisdom is the courage to see clearly. To recognize intent, not excuses. To protect your peace, not their comfort. Because if they studied your kindness just to exploit it, they didn't stumble into betrayal, they designed it. And the most powerful thing you can do now is to stop giving them the benefit of the doubt. And start giving yourself the benefit of clarity. Mistake versus pattern. We've all heard the phrase, everybody makes mistakes. And that's true. Nobody walks through life without stumbling. A sharp word spoken in anger. A promise forgotten. A moment where emotions got the better of us. Those are mistakes. They happen once, maybe twice, and they don't define a person's entire character. But let's draw a clear line here. A mistake is not the same as a pattern. A mistake is human. A pattern is a choice repeated until it becomes someone's character. And if you've ever been in a relationship, whether romantic, friendship, or even family, you know exactly what I mean. Think about it. If someone you love snaps at you once because they had a stressful day, you can understand. If they forget to call you back once, you can forgive. But if every month, every week, every argument ends the same way, with you hurt and them excusing themselves, that's not a mistake anymore. That's a cycle, and cycles reveal priorities. Here's the hard truth. When someone repeatedly chooses what benefits them at your expense, it's not confusion, it's commitment. They're committed to their own comfort, even if it costs you your peace. The Stoics had a powerful way of seeing this. Seneca once wrote, "We suffer more often in imagination than in reality." But sometimes the suffering isn't in your imagination. Sometimes it's a pattern right in front of your eyes. And your mind is just too hopeful to accept it. Because here's what happens, we start making excuses. We tell ourselves, they didn't mean it, they'll change, it's just a phase. And in doing so, we betray ourselves. We protect their potential more than our own peace. But hope without boundaries isn't hope, it's self-harm. Let me give you an example. Imagine a friend who constantly borrows money but never pays you back. The first time, you brush it off. The second time, you think, well, maybe they forgot. The third time, you start to realize, it's not forgetfulness. It's a pattern. And every time you say yes, you're teaching them how to treat you. Or consider a partner who apologizes after every argument. But nothing ever changes. The words are there, but the actions never follow. That's not growth. That's recycling. And if you're not careful, you'll spend years stuck in that loop, hoping they'll finally become who you imagined, instead of accepting who they've shown you they are. The Stoics would remind us, reality over fantasy. Epictetus said, "It's not what happens to you, but how you react to it that matters. And how you react to repeated harm determines whether you break the cycle or keep reliving it." So here's a question to ask yourself. Am I dealing with a mistake? Or am I dealing with a pattern? Because mistakes can be forgiven. Patterns must be confronted, and if they're not confronted, they will consume you. You see, patterns aren't just about behavior, they reveal a person's priorities. If someone consistently puts themselves first, it means they value their gain over your pain. And no amount of waiting, no amount of hoping, will change that truth. And yet, so many of us keep handing out second, third, and fourth chances, thinking, maybe this time will be different. But ask yourself honestly, what evidence do you have that it will? Has their pattern ever broken? Or are you just addicted to the hope that it might? Hope is a beautiful thing when paired with wisdom. But hope without boundaries is a trap. It keeps you tied to someone who benefits from your denial. This is why Stoicism teaches discernment. Not cynicism, not bitterness, discernment. The ability to look at what someone does, not just what they say. To separate accidents from strategies, mistakes from patterns, regret from remorse. And here's where the breakthrough happens. When you realize that holding on isn't love, it's fear. Fear of being alone, fear of starting over, fear of admitting that the person you trusted was never who you thought they were. But what if, instead of fearing the truth, you embraced it? What if you saw the pattern for what it was, not a sign to keep hoping, but a signal to walk away? Because here's the ultimate Stoic lesson. Your peace is not found in someone else's change. Your peace is found in your own clarity. So the next time someone hurts you and then comes back with excuses, stop and ask, is this a one-time mistake? Or has this become a pattern? And if it's a pattern, remember this. Choosing them again is not an act of love. It's an act of self-betrayal. Mistakes can be forgiven. Patterns must be broken. And breaking the pattern begins with you. Pain has a way of grabbing our attention. It cuts through the noise. It shakes us awake. But here's the thing most people don't realize. Pain is not your enemy. Pain is a messenger. Think about it. If you place your hand on a hot stove, the pain you feel isn't there to destroy you. It's there to protect you. It's a signal, a warning. Pull away before you get burned even worse. In the same way, emotional pain works like a spiritual alarm system. It tells you, something is wrong here, something is unsafe. This is not love. But too often, we ignore that signal. We tell ourselves to be patient, to endure, to wait for the storm to pass. We hope that if we hold on long enough, things will change. Yet every time we silence the alarm, every time we convince ourselves that pain is just part of love, we move closer to self-destruction. The Stoics understood this deeply. They believed that suffering can be a teacher, but only if you're willing to listen. Marcus Aurelius once wrote, "You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength." What he meant was this. The pain itself isn't the problem. The problem is when we deny its meaning. When we let hope blind us to reality. Ask yourself, how many times have you tolerated what hurt you? Because you thought love could fix what character had already broken? How many times did you say, maybe it's just a phase, while every part of your soul knew it was a pattern? Here's the truth. Real self-respect doesn't beg for re-entry. It doesn't plead with someone to see your worth. Real self-respect says, I don't hate you, but I love myself more. And that shift changes everything. Because walking away isn't about revenge. It's not about proving who's right or wrong. It's about survival. It's about refusing to keep setting yourself on fire just to keep someone else warm. I remember someone once telling me, but if I walk away, won't that make me cold? Won't that make me unkind? And I said, no, it makes you awake. It makes you wise. It makes you someone who finally decided to stop playing a role in their own suffering. Cutting ties after intentional harm is not cruelty. It's clarity. It's choosing life over slow destruction. It's choosing peace over chaos. Let me ask you a question. If a doctor told you a food was poisoning your body, would you keep eating it out of kindness? Of course not. You'd cut it out of your life immediately. Not because you hate the food, but because you value your health. The same applies to toxic people. Removing them doesn't mean you hate them. It means you love yourself enough to stop consuming what destroys you. The Stoics would call this discipline, placing boundaries not out of bitterness, but out of wisdom. Because here's the paradox. People often mistake boundaries for walls of hatred. But boundaries are not about shutting people out. Boundaries are about protecting what's sacred inside you. And let's be honest, your peace is sacred. Your clarity is sacred. Your soul is not a playground for someone else's chaos. Pain is the proof. It's the compass pointing you toward change. If every interaction with someone leaves you doubting yourself, if every reconciliation ends with you more broken than before, then pain is speaking loud and clear. This isn't love. This isn't safety. This isn't where you belong. But here's where courage comes in. Because knowing pain is a signal is one thing. Acting on it is another. And many of us stay stuck in harmful cycles because it feels easier to endure the familiar pain than to face the unknown freedom. So let me remind you, your future deserves more than recycled suffering. You are not here to be someone's emotional punching bag in the name of compassion. You are not here to sacrifice your sanity for the illusion of love. You are here to live with clarity, to honor the signals your soul is giving you, to draw boundaries so firm that even you cannot cross them in moments of weakness. So the next time you feel that pain rising, don't dismiss it, don't numb it, don't silence it with false hope. Ask yourself, what is this pain trying to teach me? Because pain, at its core, is guidance, and boundaries, at their core, are survival. And survival doesn't mean you hate them. It means you finally chose to love yourself. We've all been told since childhood, forgive and forget. It sounds noble, doesn't it? Like the ultimate sign of strength. But let's get one thing very clear today. Forgiveness is not the same as reconciliation. You can forgive someone and still never let them back into your life. And in many cases, that's exactly what wisdom requires. Forgiveness is about you. It's about freeing your soul from bitterness, resentment, and the poison of anger. But reconciliation? That's about them. And not everyone has earned that privilege. Think about it. If someone smashed the windows of your home, you could choose to forgive them in your heart. You could release the anger so it doesn't eat you alive. But would you hand them another rock and leave the door wide open? Of course not. That wouldn't be forgiveness. That would be foolishness. And yet, so many of us do this with our hearts. We confuse letting go of resentment with letting someone back in. We mistake kindness for compliance. And when we do that, we turn ourselves into a playground for manipulation. The Stoics warned us about this very thing. Epictetus once said, "It is not things themselves that disturb us, but our opinions about them." Forgiveness changes your opinion about the past. It allows you to reinterpret your pain in a way that liberates you. But boundaries? Boundaries change your future. They protect you from reliving the same cycle over and over again. Let me ask you a question. How many times have you forgiven someone, only to see the same pattern repeat? How many times did your forgiveness become their license to harm you again? Because here's the brutal truth. If you forgive without boundaries, you're not practicing mercy, you're practicing self-neglect. Real forgiveness doesn't mean you put yourself back in the line of fire. It doesn't mean you keep answering their calls, reopening old doors, or giving them the benefit of the doubt after they've already shown you their true nature. Real forgiveness says, I don't hate you, but I refuse to hand you the tools to break me again. Think of forgiveness like healing a wound. You clean it, you let it close, you move forward. But if you keep picking at it, reopening it, exposing it to the very thing that caused the damage, you're not healing anymore. You're sabotaging yourself. And let's be honest, many people misunderstand forgiveness because it benefits them when you do. They'll say things like, if you really forgave me, you wouldn't still be distant. If you truly let go, you'd give me another chance. But that's not forgiveness. That's manipulation disguised as morality. Forgiveness is a personal act. It doesn't require an audience. It doesn't require a reunion. It's the silent decision that says, I refuse to carry the weight of your actions anymore. But boundaries are the guardrails that keep your healing intact. Without them, forgiveness becomes permission. And once forgiveness becomes permission, you're no longer forgiving, you're enabling. The Stoics understood that self-mastery is not about how much you can endure, but about what you refuse to allow. Marcus Aurelius wrote, the happiness of your life depends upon the quality of your thoughts. And if your thoughts are constantly weighed down by the same toxic cycle, then you haven't truly freed yourself. So here's what I want you to take away. Forgiveness is release. Boundaries are protection. And you need both. One without the other is incomplete. Forgive to free yourself, but protect your peace so you don't have to keep forgiving for the same wound. Now let me ask you, what would your life look like if you started separating these two things? What relationships would you finally walk away from if you realized forgiveness doesn't mean reunion? What energy would you reclaim if you stopped letting forgiveness be the excuse that keeps toxic people in your life? Because here's the ultimate Stoic truth. Your peace is sacred. Forgive boldly, but guard that peace fiercely. So yes, forgive, but never forget the lesson that came with the pain. Yes, release the bitterness, but don't release the boundaries. Because without them, forgiveness isn't healing, it's self-betrayal. The truth about kindness and silence. Let's talk about kindness. We live in a world that tells us, be kind at all costs. Be patient, turn the other cheek, keep giving. No matter what. And yes, kindness is one of the greatest virtues we can practice. But here's the uncomfortable truth. Kindness without boundaries is not kindness, it's self-neglect. True kindness has limits. It has edges. It has a backbone. Because when kindness forgets to protect itself, it doesn't inspire love, it invites abuse. Think about it. Have you ever noticed how toxic people gravitate toward the kindest souls? They can sense it. They know you'll forgive, you'll overlook, you'll keep giving one more chance. And they take that softness, not as a gift, but as permission. But Stoicism teaches us something radically different. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "The best revenge is not to be like your enemy." That doesn't mean becoming cruel. It means staying kind, but with wisdom, with boundaries, with clarity. Because kindness with boundaries is power. It's the ability to love without becoming someone's doormat. It's the ability to forgive without inviting the same harm again. It's the strength to say, I can care about you and still say no. I can wish you well and still walk away. And then there's silence. People often mistake silence for weakness. They think that if you don't react, if you don't shout, if you don't defend yourself, you must be fragile. But here's the paradox. Silence is one of the strongest weapons you will ever hold. Why? Because toxic people feed on reaction. Conflict is their oxygen. Drama is their playground. They provoke. They push. They twist your words, all to get you to break. And the moment you explode, they win. They point at your anger, your tears, your frustration, and they say, see, you're the problem. But silence denies them the one thing they crave most, control. When you go quiet, you starve the fire. When you refuse to react, you strip away their power. You become the mirror they cannot face. Because your stillness reflects back their own chaos. Silence is not passive. It's not cowardice. It's deliberate restraint. It's the wisdom to know that not every battle deserves your energy. Not every insult deserves your response. Not every manipulator deserves your explanation. Have you ever noticed how unsettling silence can be? Arguments die in silence. Manipulation crumbles in silence. Toxic people expect noise, tears, yelling, explanations. Because noise gives them something to twist. But silence? Silence gives them nothing. And nothing is impossible to manipulate. The Stoics understood this. Epictetus once said, "It's not what happens to you, but how you react to it that matters." Silence is not the absence of a reaction, it's the highest form of reaction. It's saying, I will not bleed for someone who stabbed me. I will not dance to the tune of someone else's chaos. So let's put it together, kindness and silence. Kindness with boundaries is your shield. Silence with discipline is your sword. Together, they form the strongest armor you will ever wear. Imagine this. Someone insults you, waiting for you to defend yourself, to prove your worth. Instead, you smile calmly, you say nothing, and you walk away. That's power. Someone tries to bait you into old arguments, hoping you'll relive the same pain. Instead, you respond with silence that says, this chapter is closed. That's mastery. Because here's the truth. Silence often speaks louder than words. It says, I know what you did. And I know who I am now. I don't owe you my energy, my explanations, or my pain. And kindness, real kindness, doesn't mean tolerating disrespect. It means refusing to sink to the level of those who feed on chaos. It means guarding your peace. so you can continue being kind to the people who truly deserve it. So the next time someone tells you that you're too kind, remember, kindness is not weakness. But make sure your kindness has edges. Make sure it knows how to say no. Make sure it knows when to walk away. And the next time someone mistakes your silence for fragility, let them, because while they're busy underestimating you, you'll be standing firm in your discipline, stronger than they ever imagined. Kindness without boundaries is vulnerability. Silence without purpose is avoidance. But kindness with boundaries, silence with discipline, that's power. That's clarity. That's emotional intelligence in action. So here's my question for you. Where in your life have you confused silence with weakness? Where have you confused kindness with submission? And what would change if you started practicing both with wisdom? Because once you do, you stop being someone's supply. You stop being their target. You stop being the one they can push, provoke, and manipulate. You rise above, calm in chaos, quiet in storms, kind, but not naive, silent, but not weak. And that is the kind of strength the world can't shake. The illusion of closure. Let's talk about one of the most dangerous illusions we hold onto after being hurt, the idea of closure. We wait for it. We beg for it. We think if they would just explain why they did what they did, then maybe we could finally heal. We tell ourselves, if they apologize, if they admit the truth, if they just give me the answers I deserve, then I'll be able to move on. But here's the harsh truth. Closure doesn't come from them. Closure comes from you. Closure is not a speech. It's not a text message. It's not an apology that suddenly makes all the pain make sense. Real closure is a decision. It's the moment you stop waiting for their words, their remorse, their explanation, and you decide that your healing is not dependent on their cooperation. Because if they damaged you intentionally, why would you expect them to suddenly become the guide to your healing? The same person who caused the wound is not the one who will close it. Looking for closure in them is like searching for water in a desert. They don't have what you're thirsting for. In fact, most of the time, when you go looking for closure from someone who hurt you, you don't find peace, you find more confusion. They rewrite the story. They twist the facts. They turn themselves into the victim. And instead of clarity, you walk away questioning yourself even more. Haven't you seen this before? You ask, why did you do it? And they respond, you're too sensitive. You misunderstood. I was going through something. Suddenly the pain they caused becomes your fault. That's not closure. That's manipulation. So what is closure? Really? Closure is when you stop chasing their answers and start living your own. It's when you say, they don't get to define the ending of my story. I do. The Stoics understood this deeply. Epictetus taught, it's not what happens to you, but how you react to it that matters. Closure isn't about them finishing the story. It's about you refusing to let the story own you anymore. Here's an image to consider. Imagine you're holding a book that someone else ripped in half. The pages are missing. The ending is gone. You keep waiting for them to come back and hand you the missing chapters. But they never will. And here's the revelation. You don't need them to. You can put the book down. You can start a new one. The ending you're looking for doesn't come from them. It comes from you choosing to stop rereading what broke you. Real closure is when you wake up one morning and realize, I don't need their apology anymore. I don't need their explanation. I don't need their approval. I just need my peace. And ironically, that's when healing finally begins, not when they give you answers, but when you stop needing them. Let me ask you something. How long have you been waiting for someone else to hand you the freedom you already have the power to claim? How many sleepless nights have you spent replaying conversations? Drafting texts you'll never send? Imagining confrontations that will never happen? And what if you could take all of that energy back today? The truth is, closure is not something they can give you. It's something you create. It's not an event, it's a choice. You become closure when you stop reopening wounds by chasing explanations. You become closure when you accept the truth for what it is, not for what you wish it were. You become closure when you write your own ending instead of waiting for someone else to finish the chapter for you. And here's the paradox. The moment you stop chasing closure, you find it. Because closure isn't about making sense of their actions, it's about making peace with your own. It's realizing that their silence is an answer. Their absence is an answer. Their lack of change is an answer. And sometimes the most liberating thing you can do is stop asking the question. The Stoics would call this self-mastery. To stop looking outward for resolution and start looking inward for strength. To stop waiting for someone else to release you. And to release yourself. So if you've been waiting for that apology, that explanation, that conversation that will tie everything neatly together, let it go. Write your own ending. Be your own closure. Because you don't need their words to heal. You don't need their presence to move forward. You don't need their permission to be free. Closure is not given, it's claimed. And the day you decide that is the day your healing truly begins. We love the idea of second chances. Movies, books, and even society itself romanticize them. The story goes like this. Someone makes a mistake. They come back with tears in their eyes. They beg for forgiveness, and everything finally works out. It's beautiful on screen, but in real life, second chances often come with a hidden cost, your peace. Because here's the truth. The first time is a warning. The second time is a pattern. The Stoics would remind us that human behavior rarely lies. A single action could be a slip. But repetition? Repetition reveals character. If someone has already shown you they are willing to cross your boundaries, giving them another chance isn't mercy, it's an invitation to repeat the harm. Think about it like this. If you touch fire once, you burn your hand. That pain is a warning. If you touch it again, the fire doesn't change, you do. You've ignored the lesson, and now you're the one responsible for your scars. When you grant someone a second chance after intentional harm, you're teaching your subconscious something dangerous, that your self-worth is negotiable. That betrayal is acceptable, as long as it comes with an apology afterward. That your boundaries are flexible depending on how nicely someone asks for another chance. But your self-worth is not a bargaining chip. Your peace is not up for negotiation. Here's what makes this even more complicated. Apologies are easy. Anyone can say, "I'm sorry," especially when they realize they've lost their access to you. Especially when they're uncomfortable with the consequences of their actions. But real change? Real accountability? That's rare. Let's be brutally honest. How many times have you heard, "I'll change, I promise," only to find yourself in the same cycle months later? How many times has the apology been nothing more than a reset button, allowing them back into your life to repeat the exact same behavior? The Stoics would call this self-betrayal, when you know the truth. But you choose denial because denial feels easier than loss. Forgiveness, yes, is noble. Forgiveness frees you from bitterness. But forgiveness does not require reunion. Forgiveness does not mean re-entry. You can forgive someone in your heart and still never allow them into your life again. That is not cruelty. That is wisdom. That is spiritual maturity. Marcus Aurelius once wrote, "The happiness of your life depends on the quality of your thoughts." And if your thoughts are constantly weighed down by the same person's repeated harm, then you haven't freed yourself. You've chained yourself to their cycle. Let me give you an example. Imagine you lend your car to a friend. They return it damaged, and they apologize. You forgive them, but would you immediately hand them the keys again the next day? Of course not. Forgiveness releases the anger, but boundaries protect the car. In the same way, forgiveness releases your pain, but boundaries protect your soul. And here's the paradox of second chances. What feels like compassion is often just self-abandonment. Because if nothing in their behavior has changed, if they haven't taken responsibility, if they haven't shown consistent effort, then all you're doing is inviting the same pain back into your life. So let me ask you, how many times have you confused their apology for transformation? How many times have you accepted regret as if it were true remorse? The Stoics would tell you this. Clarity is mercy. The clearest thing you can do for yourself is to believe what someone shows you the first time. Because to pretend otherwise is to betray your own wisdom. Giving endless second chances doesn't prove how kind you are. It only proves how much you're willing to sacrifice yourself for people who refuse to grow. So here's the call to action. Stop making your self-worth negotiable. Stop teaching your heart that betrayal is something you can tolerate if it comes wrapped in the right words. Stop confusing forgiveness with reconciliation. Forgiveness is freedom. Second chances, when nothing has changed, are chains. And remember this. Not everyone deserves a seat at the table of your life. Some people have already flipped the table once, and they'll do it again if you let them back in. Your peace is too sacred to risk on another, maybe this time. So the next time someone who hurt you asks for a second chance, pause. Look beyond the words. Ask yourself, have they truly changed? Or do they just hate losing access to me? If the answer is no, then walking away isn't cruelty. It's clarity. Forgive, yes. Release the bitterness. But never confuse forgiveness with access. Because protecting your peace is not only an act of strength, it's the highest form of self-respect. Common manipulation tactics. One of the hardest parts of walking away from toxic people isn't just the pain they caused. It's the tricks they use to pull you back in. Because when someone knows they can no longer control you with love, they'll try to control you with manipulation. And unless you know how to recognize those tactics, you'll find yourself caught in the same cycle over and over again. So let's talk about the 4 most common manipulation strategies you need to look out for, and how to break free from them. 1. Role reversal. They become the victim. Have you noticed how quickly some people flip the script? You set a boundary, you decide to walk away, and suddenly, you're the bad guy. They say things like, "I can't believe you're abandoning me. After everything we've been through, you're just walking away?" It's a classic reversal. They caused the damage, but somehow you're left feeling guilty for protecting yourself. This is emotional theater. They cast themselves as the victim, and you as the villain. And if you're not careful, you'll start believing their story instead of your own truth. The Stoics warned against this kind of distortion. Epictetus said, "If someone succeeds in provoking you, realize your mind is complicit in the provocation." In other words, if you accept their false narrative, you become part of your own manipulation. 2. Guilt tripping. You're too sensitive. Another favorite tactic? Making you doubt yourself. They'll tell you, "You're overreacting. You're too cold. You're too sensitive." Notice the pattern. It shifts the focus away from their behavior and onto your reaction. Instead of addressing what they did, they make you question whether you're the problem. But here's the truth. Sensitivity isn't weakness. Sensitivity is awareness. It means you feel the signals of disrespect and betrayal clearly. The real weakness is pretending not to notice. So when someone accuses you of being too sensitive, remember, what they're really saying is, "I want you to stop noticing how I hurt you." 3. Breadcrumbing. Little crumbs of hope. This one is subtle but powerful. Right when you're ready to walk away, they dangle a little hope. They say, "Let's start over. I promise I'll change. I can't lose you." And for a moment, you think maybe this time it will be different. But here's the problem. They give you just enough to keep you emotionally hooked, but never enough to actually change. It's like being fed crumbs when you deserve a feast. You keep starving for real love, but they never provide it. And every time you stay, the cycle repeats. The Stoics would tell us, reality matters more than promises. Don't judge someone by the crumbs they hand you. Judge them by the consistency of their actions. If nothing changes, then nothing changes. 4. Using the past as a weapon. Perhaps the most manipulative of all is when they weaponize your shared history. They remind you of all the good times, the laughs, the intimacy. They say things like, "We've been through so much together. You can't just throw it all away." But here's the truth. If your past was enough to justify their place in your future, they would have protected the relationship. Time shared is not the same as respect given. Years together don't excuse repeated harm. The Stoics would call this clarity, seeing things as they are, not as you wish they were. The past is not a free pass to destroy your present. How do you break free? Recognition. That's the first step, because once you can name the manipulation, it loses its power. Call it what it is. Role reversal isn't love, it's guilt theater. Guilt tripping isn't honesty, it's control. Breadcrumbing isn't growth, it's emotional starvation. The past isn't a reason, it's a weapon. And the moment you call these tactics out, even silently to yourself, you reclaim your clarity. You stop playing their game because you finally see the rules. Marcus Aurelius once said, "You have power over your mind, not outside events." Realize this, and you will find strength. And that strength begins when you stop internalizing manipulation and start naming it for what it is. So ask yourself right now, who in your life keeps flipping the script? Who keeps dangling crumbs instead of giving you real change? Who keeps chaining you to the past instead of building a better future with you? And more importantly, How much longer will you allow it? Because freedom begins with recognition. And once you see clearly, you can walk away, not with anger, not with revenge, but with clarity. And clarity, my friends, is power. The power of silence and mental discipline. Sometimes the strongest voice is no voice at all. You see, toxic people survive on your reaction. They feed on your anger, your explanations, your endless defense of yourself. Every time you argue, every time you try to prove your worth, they feel in control. But the moment you choose silence, you take that control away. 1. Why toxic people fear silence. Imagine someone throwing bait into the water. Their hope is that you bite. And once you do, they've got you hooked. That's exactly what toxic people do when they push your buttons. They want you to explode so they can point and say, "See, you're the problem." They want you to defend yourself so they can twist your words. They want you to beg so they can feel superior. But when you stay silent, they're left with nothing to hold on to. No bait taken, no hook set, just their own frustration echoing back at them. And that's when their power crumbles, because their influence depended on your reaction, not their actions. 2. Silence is a refusal without explanation. Silence is not weakness. It's not avoidance. It's refusal. And what makes it powerful is that it doesn't come with a long explanation or apology. Think about it. When you say nothing, you don't give them material to argue with. You don't hand them ammunition to use against you. You simply walk away from the battlefield and refuse to play the game. Marcus Aurelius said, "The best revenge is not to be like your enemy." Silence embodies that wisdom. You don't mirror their chaos, you choose dignity. You choose restraint. You choose your peace. 3. Silence is the ultimate spiritual weapon. Noise is easy. Anyone can shout, argue, or throw accusations. But silence, that requires strength. It requires discipline. When you stay silent, you are not suppressing yourself, you are protecting yourself. You're making a conscious decision. I will not let this person live rent-free in my head. I will not let their chaos disturb my inner peace. In that way, silence becomes the highest form of self-respect. It is the shield that guards your spirit from being dragged into unnecessary battles. Think about the times you responded to someone who didn't deserve your energy. Did it ever actually solve the problem? Or did it only pull you deeper into the mud? Now contrast that with the times you said nothing and simply moved forward. Which one gave you more peace? 4. Silence isn't passive, it's active discipline. Many people mistake silence for doing nothing. But silence isn't passive, it's active discipline. It takes enormous strength to resist the urge to defend yourself when lies are told. It takes self-control not to respond to provocation. It takes wisdom to realize that you don't need to attend every argument you're invited to. In fact, silence is a decision to put your energy into growth instead of conflict, into healing instead of chaos, into progress instead of arguments that go nowhere. Seneca, another great Stoic, said, "We suffer more often in imagination than in reality." Arguments are the perfect example. Most of them don't exist outside the stories we keep replaying in our minds. Silence frees us from those mental prisons. 5. The inner peace that comes from silence. When you stop giving toxic people your reactions, something incredible happens. You reclaim your inner peace. Your mind becomes quieter. Your body feels lighter. The stress that once consumed you begins to fade. And suddenly, you realize that you never needed their validation, their apology, or their understanding to move on. Silence teaches you something profound. Closure doesn't come from them. Closure comes from you deciding. This is where the story ends. And that's a power no one can take away. 6. Practical reflection. So let me ask you, who in your life keeps baiting you for a reaction? Who thrives on your anger, your defense, your explanations? And what would happen if, starting today, you gave them nothing? No energy, no words, no reaction. Wouldn't that be the greatest act of freedom? To no longer dance to their tune but to walk away in complete peace? Final thought. Silence is not emptiness, it's strength. It's the invisible boundary that protects your soul. It is the quiet yet powerful declaration, I don't need to fight you to win. I win by not playing. So the next time someone toxic demands your reaction, remember, your silence speaks louder than any argument ever could. And in that silence, you will find not weakness, but the ultimate strength. Final choice: protecting your peace. As we come to the end of this journey, I want you to remember something essential. Forgiveness is not about letting someone back into your life. Forgiveness is about letting yourself out of the prison they put you in. Too many people confuse forgiveness with reconciliation. They think that if you forgive, it means you must open the door again. But true forgiveness isn't a key that unlocks the past. It's the decision to set yourself free from carrying someone else's burden. 1. Forgiveness is for you, not for them. When you forgive, you're not giving your abuser or betrayer a second chance. You're giving yourself permission to breathe again. You're saying, I will not let the weight of your actions chain me down any longer. Think about it. Why should your healing come at the price of letting someone back in who has already shown you their intentions? You can forgive in your heart and still close the door firmly behind you. In fact, that's the healthiest way to forgive, because it frees you without binding you to them again. 2. They don't deserve the healed version of you. Here's a harsh truth. No one who deliberately broke you deserves to meet the healed, wiser, stronger version of you. They saw your vulnerability, your kindness, your love, and instead of honoring it, they exploited it. That wasn't a mistake. That was a choice. And because of that, they don't get the privilege of access to who you've become now. Your healing is not a second chance for them. It's a new life for you. 3. Remember, it was never an accident. This is one of the hardest pills to swallow. The person who hurt you didn't just slip up. They weren't confused. They weren't clumsy with your heart. They made a conscious decision. And once you accept that, it becomes easier to let go of the fantasy that they might one day change. Because if harm was intentional, why gamble with your peace by letting them back in? The Stoics remind us that we cannot control what others choose, but we can control whether or not we allow those choices to touch our spirit again. 4. Breaking the cycle. Every time you let someone toxic back into your life, you teach yourself, subconsciously, that your worth is negotiable, that your boundaries can be bent, that your peace is less important than their presence. But every time you walk away and stand firm, you send a new message to your soul. I am not a playground for manipulation. I am not a punching bag for someone else's anger. I am not an option. I am a priority. Walking away may feel painful in the moment, but it's the only way to stop the cycle. Because the cycle only ends when you decide it ends. 5. Silence is your final word. Sometimes, the most powerful closure you can give is not an explanation, not a speech, not a final conversation, but silence. Silence says, this chapter is finished. There's nothing more to discuss. My peace matters more than your validation. And that silence is unarguable. They can shout, they can blame, they can twist, but they can't argue with your absence. They can't manipulate what you don't respond to. They can't disturb the peace you've chosen not to surrender. 6. You don't owe them anything. One of the greatest lies we tell ourselves is that we owe people closure, forgiveness, or one last chance. But you don't. You don't owe them your time, you don't owe them your explanations, you don't owe them another opportunity to hurt you. The only debt you carry is to yourself. To guard your peace, to honor your self-respect, to protect the healing you worked so hard for. The philosopher Epictetus said, no man is free who is not master of himself. And mastery means recognizing when enough is enough. 7. The final choice is yours. So here's the truth. You are at a crossroads. You can continue the endless loop of hurt, apology, repeat, or you can choose something higher. You can choose to stop waiting for apologies that will never come. You can choose to stop opening doors that lead you back into chaos. You can choose to guard your silence, protect your peace, and respect your worth. The final choice is not about them. It's about you. Closing reflection. As we end, I want you to ask yourself one question. What do I owe myself that I've been trying to get from others? Is it respect? Then give it to yourself. Is it peace? Then guard it fiercely. Is it love? Then stop waiting for theirs and start overflowing with your own. You don't need their apology to heal. You don't need their presence to feel whole. You don't need their permission to move on. The only permission you need, the only choice that matters, is the one you make today. To forgive, not to let them back in, but to finally walk free. Because you don't owe them anything, you only owe yourself everything.